All right, the recording has now started. Um, all right, so we're going to talk today about dream yoga for psychic and psychological self-defense. What the importance of this is that we can change what we can face and we can heal what we can feel. And I definitely know that it is a really tough subject, that it's something that a lot of people are fearful about. But it's also what causes a lot of fear is that people don't understand what's happening and they don't understand the power that they have in order to protect themselves from this. So one of the methods that are so I'm going to give a rundown of all of the methods that are being used, and I'm going to give some examples. So the examples are, of course, not exhaustive in the sense that, there must be many more examples, but these are the basic categories. And the first category that I would like to share something about is entrainment. Entrainment is when you establish a pattern into a person's mind by rhythm and repetition. This opens up the psyche for influence, but it does not have a harmful effect in and of itself. Um, so, one example of entrainment is when Aleister Crowley, a famous Satanist, how do you say that in English? Satanic follower, would practice entrainment combined with depatterning, which I'm going to talk about after this. He would walk behind someone, following their footsteps. So his pattern of footsteps would be the same pattern as the footsteps of the person in front of him. And then once he entrained himself to that pattern, to that rhythm, he would make a weird, a stumble, which would cause the person in front of him to fall down. So entraining really has to do with matching the frequency. And this doesn't need to be bad in and of itself. This can actually be a positive thing when we use it in healing, because it is something that impacts the mind. So this is not a black or white thing. For instance, in a shamanic journey, when you use the drum to match the heartbeat, you are entraining to the heartbeat. So you can actually, by doing that, slow the heart down. There are also stories, for instance, of a someone who had like a wild animal coming up to them, and then they started playing the drum really fast because the heart of the animal was going really fast, and then they would slow it down. So that is again depatterning and entrainment. So that would actually slow the heartbeat down of the animal that was coming towards it, and therefore giving it more calm and peace and not being in the attacking state anymore. And this is also used, for instance, in conflict resolution. If someone is emotionally charged, when you give their words back to them, like, I hear you say this, is that correct? It releases the tension, and it can actually have a very healing effect. And then you can start to have a constructive conversation. But it's like this entrainment needs to happen before some change can take place. But a negative way in which entrainment is being used is, for instance, our social medias collecting cookies and feeding our preferences back to us, which allows us to be entrained online via the algorithms of social media. And another example of entrainment is when we're watching television, we are seeing archetypes that are that we recognize. For instance, if we watch a soap series and we recognize ourselves in somebody else that's performing who is doing the acting, then whatever they do kind of hypnotizes us and it mirrors something in us. And if that entrainment is then met with depatterning, which I'm gonna come to later. I've mentioned it a few times now because it basically always goes together. Then it has a big effect. So basically, what entrainment does is it opens up the psyche for influence. And what we need to do is we need to notice when it happens. So when you notice that something is being fed back to you, like you're having a reverb in the universe. If somebody else is doing it, if your computer is doing it, if your television is doing it, if the radio is doing it, whatever, if it's in a healing journey, just notice when when it happens, and then be aware of the intention of the one who is entraining you. So if it's someone doing that, for instance, with the algorithm, what is their intention? And if it's someone guiding you through some kind of a journey, ask them, what is your intention if you're not sure? If it's clear, like we're doing this healing thing, it's great. And if you have trust, great. Because we do need to trust each other in order to be guided through something. But if you have an icky feeling about something, if just something feels off, trust that. And if we take that to the dream space, if we are dealing with beings, entities, let's say, that are visiting us in their dream space, you can ask 3 times or shine light 3 times on them to ask what their intention is. And this actually also works with secret agents. So people who are working for the AIVD in Dutch, how do you call it? Like the secret services. If you feel that somebody might be an infiltrant, ask them 3 times. And you will feel the 3rd time is really hard to keep the lie. So that's something that we need to learn to do, and really to trust our intuition. So that's the next point, trusting our intuition. But how do you do that? How do you know that something is intuition? Well, I can tell you that it's not a panic or fear. So I'm going to go to the next slide. You recognize intuition because it has the 4 C's. So this is from internal family system. The 4 C's, they're actually more than 4, but at least 4 of these qualities need to be present. And then you know that it's your center self, your adult self, your it can even be your higher self, but it's a benevolent influence. So you recognize that by the part who is informing you, let's say, has compassion, is curious, feels connected, calm, has clarity, courage, confidence, or creativity. So when you have an insight that has 4 of these qualities, trust that. And if you have an insight that lacks all of these qualities, then try to bring in these qualities and talk to it. So if you have a thought that goes like, oh, this might be really, really wrong. Oh, I don't know. So take a step back, pause, whatever it is that you're doing, go to the bathroom, lock the door, whatever, just go into your own bubble and find your inner compassionate, curious, connected, and calm self, and have a conversation inside with these parts and figure out what's going on. So the next tactic that's being used, or let's say category, is depatterning. I've already mentioned it a few times. So depatterning is the act of changing someone's pattern of thinking, and by changing a pattern they're exposed to, or by exposing them to a completely new pattern. So I've already mentioned how, with an example, how that was done by Aleister Crowley. Um, and I have some more examples here for you. So this also doesn't need to be inherently a bad thing. This can actually be healing. But again, it depends on the intention and also on the effect. So for instance, biohacks are a example of depatterning, because you've got a pattern ingrained that you want to get rid of. Then you do a biohack, which is like, for instance, breath work or psychedelics, or cold plunging. You're basically changing a pattern, but you're doing it with the intention to heal, and that's why it's effective. It can also be mantra singing, is a form of depatterning. And removing megaliths or changing their place. This is a not benevolent form of depatterning. When there are megaliths on crossing of ley lines on the earth, they're kind of like acupuncture points. And when they're put there to have a healing effect on the Earth's grid, it is a form of depatterning when people remove them or destroy them. For instance, another form of depatterning is in the time of COVID. We've all seen this or done this. Wearing a mask is a form of depatterning. So we are basically changing our physical appearing to something that we don't want. Wearing a uniform, having to wear a uniform is also depatterning. Having to walk within markings, keeping social distance, changing the physical way that people greet each other, like the elbow bump, examples from COVID, responding to bells at school, asking for permission to use the bathroom, like having to ask for permission to use the bathroom, like in schools. So not being allowed to listen to your bodily needs, and identifying ourselves with a passport, even to pick up post that is addressed to ourselves, going through airport checks, being subjected to searches, being treated like a criminal, and scanning QR codes for access. So brainwashing is extreme depatterning as a way of attacking the personality of the victim. It's abuse when it's used to deconstruct the ego by systematically attacking the self-esteem of the individual, and it invalidates and erases the individual's natural core personality. Individuals need strong and healthy egos. I'm personally really not happy with the things that are being said a lot in the new age world, that we have to kill the ego. In order to expand awareness and transcend ego to unity consciousness, one doesn't need to kill or overpower the ego. It needs to be an ally that one is conscious and aware of, so that it doesn't take over. That is a very different thing than killing it, because it is a part of us. It's a natural phenomenon that has a function. And the function, amongst other things, is also self-protection and survival. And those are not bad needs. But yes, I totally agree that it's not a good thing when the ego is running the show and is on the steering wheel. So that's where the 4Cs come back in. So the 4Cs are the ones who are supposed to sit on the driver's seat, but we definitely do need the ego. And so brainwashing can also, with depatterning, can be a way to kill the ego. So I would like to also say something about free will. So I don't think that we need to have free will in the sense that it's like a free parking space where anybody can put their car. We need to have expressed will, so that we put our car there, so that we choose where we go in life. Free will is great, but not in the sense of having it like a free parking spot. Um, and so now I would like to talk a little bit about the combination of depatterning and entrainment. So I've already mentioned a little bit about the combination, and this is really very powerful and no problem at all when used with loving intention and mutual consent. But yeah, it's very, very problematic if used for harm. So some examples of the combination of entrainment and depatterning. This is a very positive example for me anyway, psychomagic, which is coined by Jodorowsky, which is using a symbol that represents a problem in someone's life and then transforming it to something that is empowering. So you're basically entraining. So you're taking the problem, creating a symbol out of it, and having that be something that you can touch, like something, or that you can act, like you can feel in your body. So really expanding the problem, let's say, and training with the problem, and then changing it to something that's healing and empowering. And another form of entrainment and depatterning is, which is not so benevolent, is hijacking of social movements such as indigenous environment movements and climate movements, change movements for control and surveillance. So those are movements that already existed, that really resonate with with harmony in the universe, and then they're being hijacked, and there's infiltrants being put in there in order to steer them off course and instead use those movements for control and surveillance. Another example of this is the Maslow hierarchy of needs, which is the basis for almost all of our institutions. And this has been taken from an indigenous medicine wheel. So what the Maslow hierarchy of needs is, basically, it's this indigenous medicine wheel, but then they left out community, 7 generations, and spirituality. And they changed it from a wheel into a pyramid. So this is the basis of all of our institutions. That is basically a disfigured medicine wheel, where we are really missing very important parts. And talking about that, so they're leaving out community. Another thing is, has anyone ever heard of the cremation of care ceremony? This is something that's being done every year. They're cremating care. So the principles of natural law, one of the principles is care, but that principle is being left out. So if you Google the principles of natural law, you will find all of the principles instead, besides, or how do you say it, without care. Care is not a part of that, and they cremate care every year. So community has been deleted and care has been deleted. The spiritual bypass is another example. So you are taking an element of spirituality that is real. So this part is real. You're taking that. That's the entrainment. And then you're adapting it to use it as a weapon, often used to avoid compassion. Another form of entrainment and depatterning is infiltrations in possibly all professions, including alternative healing and New Age. The transformation of pagan places into institutionalized religious places. The use of certain symbols, such as the swastika, which is a very ancient symbol that means change, and then the Nazis obviously used it, for something else. Another example is the symbol of the devil, which is the goat skull, which used to be Pan. So Pan is actually like Kokopelli, like the guardian of the seeds. It's the nature god. So it was actually a living goat who played the flute. So now they are putting these symbols everywhere of a dead goat. So they use the protector of the nature, kind of killed it and put only the skull. And another example is legalese. I don't know if you've heard of that word, but it's a deformation of language and a changing of meaning. So that means that, a lot of the words that we're using actually have different meanings in legalese, in legal language. And that's a very tricky thing. So self-defense on this topic, we all want to know. So observe the effect. If you feel that this has happened to you, if you notice there's something happening with entrainment and depatterning, observe the effect to see if it was healing or harmful. Dream types in which you can see this, because this still is something that can be either healing or harmful. When this is happening, the dream types that show up are dreams that this category I call the construction worker. So the construction worker are the types of dreams where we have like a building in ruins, or something is under construction, or there's a big flood, or there's just like the structure around us is in a way being reconstructed or deconstructed. And from what's happening in the dream, if you can really observe like what's going on, you can also tell if this is for the better or for the worse, if this is healing or harmful, because we definitely do sometimes need reconstruction in our inner system. But sometimes it is something that is not constructive, or something that we don't want to build. So when we notice that in our dreams, we can, in our daily life, intervene and say like, hey, this is not what I want to construct. So let's go in another direction. If harm was already caused, it's really important to see it for what it is, to really observe like, okay, this has happened, name it, feel it, say hello to it, whatever has been accumulated inside of you, and feel it to heal it. And the body will clean it up through biological means. And I will get more deeper into that in one of the next slides. I think it's quite a bit farther at the end. So are we still there? I hope I'm not going too fast, but there will be a recording anyway. The next tactic that's being used is dissociation by inflicted trauma or overwhelm. So what is dissociation? Dissociation is the detachment of the mind from emotions and physical feelings. Parts are created when we dissociate. And then I mean inner parts, like the inner child, but there are like sometimes hundreds of inner children that have different roles and feelings and needs. The parts are created when we dissociate, and this is a natural response to trauma, and that doesn't have to be done on purpose. And everyone has parts. Even if we just talk about the different roles that we have in life, everybody has different parts. Like we show up different as a mother than as a construction worker or as a pianist, or so there's different parts coming. That doesn't mean that we are dissociated, but when we have a trauma that's too intense to deal with, then we create parts in order to shield us from that. let's see what I want to say about this. So some examples of dissociation in mind control. And dissociation is, as I think that you can understand, is never a benevolent thing. And there are some spiritual techniques where they try to get people to dissociate because they say that it is healing. Like, for instance, when there are some people promoting astral travel in a way where you actually leave the body. And first of all, that's not needed. You can amplify your consciousness, so you don't need to leave your body. And it's actually not it's not a healthy thing to dissociate. One way that dissociation is caused is by blackmail. So they basically use the overwhelming feeling of shame in order to create a part that is going to do whatever the mind controller wants them to do. You also create parts when babies are made to cry it out, so they're being neglected. This creates parts. This is not always done intentionally, but it happens. When babies and mothers are separated too soon, this also creates parts for the both of them, like when the mother has to go back to work really fast after having a child. Guilt tripping is a way, just like blackmail, but any guilt tripping is a way of creating parts by dissociation. Like, for instance, in the COVID time, again, as an example, if you don't get the shot, you'll kill your family members and loved ones because you'll make them sick. So people who initially didn't want to get the shot, in the end did get the shot because they created a part from shame, or from guilt, actually, not shame, guilt. And then they would do whatever they wanted them to do. Hospitalized birth trauma creates parts, creates dissociation. Schools designed like prisons, lack of community. Hospitals designed like prisons. Getting unnecessary medical procedures. Child protective services being set up for the elite pedo network. Shame around sex. Pornography, violence, and rape culture. Some drugs create dissociation and trauma. Dentistry with unnecessary drilling. Being treated like prisoners in public buildings. Customs, breaking your stuff whenever you travel. Everything that's mandatory and forced by violence. Psyops and the news. Horror and thriller films. Most Hollywood films. Violent video games. Hazing, which is what students do. Circumcision creates dissociated parts. War and weapons. Police on the street with weapons, which is a threat. Police snuffing out peaceful protests with extreme violence. Having to watch police or state violence. And being taxed with the threat of violence if you don't pay up. The financial pyramid scheme of the central bank, debts in and of themselves, and how the money system is created. Toxins in food, unaffordable housing, chemtrails being sprayed and being aware of it and helpless to it. Also EMFs being censored and watching others being censored and being monitored all the time. All right, so that was quite a big list. I hope this makes it clear. And of course, there's many more, but this is just what I came up with of what fits this category. So there is healing from dissociation. We can heal from that. So we do that with parts work, integrating our parts and meeting them with love and acceptance. So ways to do that is, for instance, through IFS therapy, which means internal family systems, journaling, like finding out where the parts are, and especially if you're triggered, there usually are multiple parts going on there. Journaling, having like a conversation between the parts is really, really helpful, and just meeting them where they are. And one really important thing about it, if you're going to do that yourself, if you're dealing with a child part, it has child needs and you need to talk to it like a child. You cannot talk to it like an adult. And like if it's, for instance, a 3-year-old part that has a trauma and you're talking with it, it most probably won't need rational stuff. It will need maybe a blanket and socks. So you can just imagine yourself giving that to them, and a hug and healing and warmth and something like that. So really, when you're dealing with parts, you have to be aware that they're frozen in the time with their consciousness, in the time when the trauma has happened. So they actually didn't evolve past that time. Focusing, which is a practice of non-duality, embodiment practices helps with healing from dissociation, like really being in the body, meeting yourself where you are. And these parts also show up in dreams. So here you see the internal family systems map. This one was made by Christina Merkley and Anneke Lucas. So you see the parental self there in the middle, which is the compassionate, connected, curious, and calm self. And when there is a trauma happening, what first happens is that there's an exile. The exile is the one who holds the raw, painful emotions. The grief, the loss, the terror, the loneliness, the fear, the shame, dependency. And what happens is that to protect this exile, because the exile is the one that you that's the furthest hidden away, that's really hard to find back when you're in a trigger. So the exile is being protected by two different categories of types. So there are controllers and escapees. So always when you have a controller part or an escapee part, they are protecting an exile. They don't exist in and of themselves. They are always protecting an exile. And so the controllers are the ones who are very critical, judging, planning, striving, caretaking. And the escapees are the ones who do self-harm, are having addictions, having obsessions, compulsions, and so they basically have escaping behavior. So you can tell also when they show up in dreams, but also just with how you're feeling if you are triggered with something. If there is an escapee and or a controller, then there for sure is an exile underneath that. So how to heal dissociation with dreams. So there are two dream types that you can recognize the dissociated parts, in which dissociated parts are present. And those are Pullman dreams. That's a dream category I'll explain now. And artist dreams. So Pullman dreams are, so imagine that you have a very dirty pool with leaves in it and everything. So when the Pullman comes, what he has to do is he has to rake up all the leaves from the bottom of the pool and get them to the surface in order to clean it. So these are the dreams where you have, like, maybe you wake up screaming or crying or like really, really highly emotionally charged dreams, but their function is to clean the emotional pool. And artist dreams is another dream category, which I call the artist dream because it's weaving seemingly opposite elements together So it's basically creating combinations. So when you have in a dream a very amplified reaction to something, and then later you wake up, you're like, whoa, I reacted really strongly to that. That's to show you like, oh, you have a little bit of too big of an aversion or necessity for something. So that gives a clue that you have some healing to do there. If there's a huge aversion or a huge grasping to something that in a dream is amplified so that you can see it, then yeah, there is some work to do there. So the exile is hiding usually in the strangest element. So normally we quite know what the strangest element in the dream is, or sometimes there's multiple. But the strangest element, yeah, is usually the exile. I could go on about that for a very long time to explain why, but I hope that you can just trust me and take that from me, because yeah, it's I don't have the time to explain that in this because that's not the topic of today. But yeah, strangest element is the one that's hiding the furthest away in our subconsciousness, and that's usually the exile, but not always. All right, so last, oh no, one but last, one but last tactic, tabula rasa. So tabula rasa is where the mind of the individual or a group, community or population is either turned into a blank slate, or specific memories are distorted. So that would be depatterning or removed, which is tabula rasa. So some examples of this is on an individual level, electroshock therapy and light flashes, and drugging and things like that, which would be also extreme depatterning. But it also happens culturally when cultures are suppressed. Books are burned or banned. There's cancel culture. Things are taboo. There's shaming of certain stuff, censorship. Languages are forbidden, which happened a lot to indigenous cultures. And there are forbidden spiritual practices. Yeah, one example that I'd like to give about that is Charlemagne, back in the day, made it punishable by death if you were worshipping trees and the tree beings and hugging trees and things like that. So if you would be caught doing that, you would be punished by death. So what happened is that right now, today, we are not punishable by death anymore if we hug a tree. But a lot of people find it very embarrassing to do that because they think that other people are going to think that they're crazy. So it has a very long effect. And if something is being removed from a culture, even many generations ago, it really has it's something that needs an active action to recuperate that into culture and to really break the taboos. And that's like we need to, and it sounds like that, breaking taboo. It's not a gentle thing because you might get some resistance if you do that, and that's the courage, which comes from heart, courage, cœur in French. Courage is really having the heart to bring our ancestral wisdom back and nature's harmony and unity back. And sometimes we do have to break through things in order to get there. Other examples are making flags illegal, forbidding certain music, forbidding certain dancing, currencies losing all of their value. And this does not include Advaita Vedanta because and that is non-duality. So non-duality is not tabula rasa because non-duality includes the ego in the oneness. So it's actually, if it's done properly, it includes all the parts and the wholeness of the experience. And if it is used for spiritual bypass, then it excludes it. So then it is tabula rasa, but that's actually not Advaita Vedanta. So if somebody says, for instance, you tell somebody like, "Oh, had a really rough childhood," and then their response is, "Well, everybody chooses their parents, so and everything is perfect the way that it is." This is tabula rasa because this is, and it might not be intentional, but this is a way to delete somebody's very valid experience and taking it outside of reality and saying only perfection is real, and if you're not experiencing that, then you are basically wrong. So that they create a shame part, and so how these things stack up. And so how to recover from this? How to recover from this? All right, recovering memories. So one way to recover from tabula rasa is sharing ancestral and cultural wisdom. Talk to nature and listen to the response. And listen to the response is not verbally, obviously, but nature does respond. And when we sit under a tree and we ask it questions, images come into our heads, or somehow a knowing comes into our awareness, or it drops some leaves around us in a way that's like confirming, or a bird or a specific animal will come and sit on our lap. There's like, I have had so many experiences with nature really responding. And then if the response happens, you repeat the response to check if you understood it correctly. So for instance, if you're asking a tree, oh, how can I feel safe? And then you suddenly feel like, oh, I am protected because I'm rooted and I'm grounded. And if I just have this energy that I feel right now, then I'm filling myself up with that and then I'm full. So because I had that experience that I said that to a big tree, and then I got that response. And then I said back to the tree, okay, I hear you say this. Is this the answer? And then a red robin came and sat on the branch that was right in front of me, and it just sat there for a long time. And I just started crying, and it was so beautiful. And so I really, really recommend talking to nature as a way to recover memories. And if you really want to learn how to do that, because we did forget, Daniela Castel is really good at that. So stones and megaliths hold a lot of information. So if we go to sacred sites, we can find that also the same way that we talk to nature, to trees, for instance, we can talk to water, to the clouds, to the earth, and to the stones. And the stones actually hold a lot of information. And especially, it's very wonderful to do that when we put our bare hands on the stones. Talking to ourselves also is very helpful to recover memories. And automatic writing can also be very helpful for that. So dream types that bring back memories are Pullman dreams, which I already explained in the last part. So that's cleaning the emotional pool. So sometimes there are traumas that are resurfacing. That may not be literally the same way that it happened in the dream, but it reminds you of something and it brings back a memory of something. Angel dreams, which is the category of dreams where a spirit guide or a enlightened master or someone comes, or even a tree come, like a really impressive, these are dreams that you for sure remember your whole life if you ever had that. A lot of people have had dreams like that, where like suddenly this force of nature is coming and communicates something to you. That's a way of recovering memories. And genie dreams, which are kind of like wish fulfillment dreams, um, where we where we wish, if we wish that something would happen, and in the dream it actually is already happening. So sometimes these recoveries happen in that way, where we just get the experience in the dream that something is recovered, and in that way the memory is also recovered. um, so the last one, um, psychic driving. um, Psychic driving is programming motivations into people's minds to compel their behavior. This can happen to our minds directly, or in the collective consciousness and into ley lines. So this is the last category of mind control, and I will also give some examples of that. So some examples of psychic driving are subliminal messages. So these are messages that appear, for instance, in videos or in audible messages, like from the radio or something like that, that are very short, very like you can't process consciously that you've heard or seen it, but your subconscious mind does pick it up, and then it's being repeated. So you can actually see that if you slow down images, and for instance Disney and Hollywood is full of that. Another way that psychic driving is happening, which can be used for something positive, is a neuro-linguistic programming. So you actually choose the subliminal message that you're sending yourself, and they might not be subliminal, but you are giving yourself a repeated message that you actually want. A less benevolent way to use psychic driving is what news reporters do when they repeat the same stuff. I have some videos that I'm not going to show today, where you basically see that maybe 50 different news channels were saying the exact same thing around 9/11, I think that was. And another way of psychic driving is installing code words by repeating them. So these code words you probably have heard before, and these are psychic driven code words. The Great Reset, too big to fail, trust the science, reduce your footprint. So these are keywords, code words that are meant to have a certain effect on people, because they always also go together with other influences. And I have actually an interesting dream that I'm going to talk about how I discovered that reduce your footprint was a code word, and it didn't mean what you think it means. Another way that psychic driving is being used is predictive programming. So that's when they're about to do some kind of trauma causing to the whole global system, like by having false flag attacks or things like that. They already like anchor words about that and images of that in popular media. Remote influencing is done to either an individual or done on a cultural level through occult rituals and through the use of ley lines. And here is where egregores come in. So egregores are thought forms that have had a lot of energy put to them. And egregores can be benevolent and malevolent. And basically we create them all the time, also when we dream, when we think. But when we put a lot of attention to something, we create, let's say, an entity um, in in other dimensions. And if that entity has had a lot of energy to it, which can be group consciousness, or it can be a deity, it can be some demon, it can start to have a will of its own. So it can actually start to interact with reality. Um, and this really, the egregores really goes back um, into how reality is created in the first place. That is like the big Maya, the big illusion, how everything is energy, really. But we appear as physical beings. But that doesn't mean that, for instance, if I don't believe in tigers and if I'm walking through a rainforest, that I can't be attacked by a tiger just because I don't believe in it. So these thought forms definitely do exist, and it doesn't matter if you believe in it or not. But if I believe in it and I give it more energy and I worship it, especially, and I give it even offerings, then it grows, and it grows in power, and it does, and the powers that shouldn't be, let's say, are very well aware of that and using certain egregores in order to disturb reality. All right, so how to heal from this? All right. So Kurt Barker put out a book, which is called, let's see, I have the name here. No, I don't have the name here. I think it's Psychological Self-Defense or Psychic Self-Defense. And he describes Fabian therapy. And that's really mostly for people who have been subjected to mind control tactics and psychic driving personally, like who have been ingrained with stuff. But it actually also works for anyone who has been ingrained with stuff that's just been put out in the media. The dream type that this shows up in is artist dreams. So I'd like to share about the dream that I had that made me discover about reduce your footprints. So I had a recurring dream where I was on high heels, which is a very strange symbol for me because I never wear high heels. So for somebody who wears high heels every day, that wouldn't be a strange symbol. For me, it was weird. So I had a recurring dream that I was walking on high heels and I was running away from, in one dream, running away from a transvestite. In another dream, I was running away from people who were climate activists, but they were there was something off about them. So they weren't actually climate activists. They were doing something different. And in the last dream that I had about that, there were the climate activists and the whole LGBT movement. And they all, and I had high heels on again, and I was running away, and then they all disappeared and left their shoes behind. And then I started to really dig into like, well, okay, so what does that mean, high heels, and what does it mean to me? And I just thought, if I'm wearing high heels, I have a very small footprint. And then it dawned on me, I was like, oh my God, reducing your footprint. What kind of message is that? It means that you're not rooted in the earth. It means that you are basically having to tiptoe on the earth and not have any impact, as if all of the impact that we're having is negative. Instead of the message being, let's take care of the trees, let's plant more seeds, let's harmonize earth and everything. No, the message is reduce your footprint. So there I realized, like, wow, that's something that has been impacting me, because I had also ingrained in me this kind of shame of being human and we're polluting and blah, blah, blah. Instead of taking like, no, but I have a responsibility. Like, I'm not inherently bad. I don't need to die in order for the earth to be a better place. I actually need to be more grounded in the earth and care more for the earth and take more responsibility for the earth instead of less. So yeah, that is one artist dream where I had an amplified reaction to something which made me see what that actually meant. So I already mentioned something about the biological process of healing that we have. So something that I'm not a religious person, by the way, but I do believe that Jesus existed and that he was let's say, an avatar who came here to heal the planet and harmonize. So supposedly he said, nothing that enters a person from the outside can defile them, for it doesn't go into their heart, but into their stomach and then out of the body. So, and I do believe that that's true. So, in what way do we clean up biologically and emotionally? So every night when we're sleeping, the glymphatic system, which is in the brain, it collects and removes dangerous metabolic contaminants generated by the hard work performed by the neurons in the brain. And this happens during non-REM sleep. So non-REM sleep is the time that we are not dreaming. So actually, the cerebral spinal fluid is washing our whole brain of all of the activity every night in between dream states. And after that, we have REM sleep, which are dreams, and that's the time when we process the stuff. So we actually have a very good inner resistance to all of this stuff, and that's also the reason that the people who are mind controlled, let's say mind control slaves and sleeper soldiers, they have to be reprogrammed for it to work. Around 30, the programming wears off and they start to remember stuff and they start to heal. And that's why all these celebrities end up in rehab and then come out with their hair blonde dyed, because they've been reprogrammed again and subjected again to electroshock and drugging and psychic driving and all the stuff, because it actually it doesn't last. So also on the global population, it also doesn't last, and that's why they need to continue doing that. Which, if I just think about it, it's so extremely tiring. I can't believe that they have the energy for that, because they have to keep doing it for it to work. Because if they would stop one day, we would heal and see the reality in no time. So when we are noticing that, for instance, there has been trauma inflicted on us, and we have dissociated. This can even happen, like an example is, I'm scrolling on social media and I'm seeing that somebody somewhere in the world got shot or got like attacked or something like that, and I have a shock reaction in my system. So what I need to do then is stop what I'm doing, feel into my body, and what will happen naturally is either I will have to pee if I'm processing it well, or I have to poo, or I have to shake. That's processing. So if I vomit or faint or feel like, that can be a sign that you need to build more nervous system capacity to process it. So that is, are really clear signs of when we are either able to process something or unable to process something. You can tell by your bodily responses and functions. So, one last thing that I want to say about this is that evil doesn't exist in and of itself. They always need something inherently good or real as a basis to transform. We can notice the distortions and bring them back to source and harmony and pure awareness. That is the presentation. And I just want to share that I am covering a lot of the healing that I mentioned in my upcoming course, which is starting in April 23rd, which is called Cultivating Quality Presence. So what's covered in that course is improving sleep quality. So allowing the glymphatic system, that wash that we have naturally of our cerebral spinal fluid, to really function, so that we go through all of the sleep phases and don't wake up all the time in the night. Dream recall, dream types, the strangest element and how that relates to the exile, blind spots and parts. Of course, we will be cultivating the 4 C's and doing embodiment practices. And lucidity is also a part of it, which is amplifying our soul's ability to integrate parts and much more. And lucidity also goes to full blown enlightenment, and dream constellations. So that is it. I'm now going to stop the screen share.